Promised, we are joined by Dr. Abraham Rugo, who is the Executive Director, Bajeti Hub. He is in Nairobi. Dr. Rugo, help us make sense of a couple of things. When Kenya went to China, they went with a wish list, as I highlighted there, including a conclusion of discussions on the expansion of the standard gauge railway, as well as the dualling of the Nairobi Northern Bypass. What was signed that I saw and that was spoken about by the Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary was 36 billion shillings in funding for 15 rural roads. What do you make of that?
Thank you very much, Olive, and it's a pleasure to be able to join you, even if virtually. Yes, I think it's important to appreciate that China is definitely being cautious. When Kenya went, to these conversations with the Chinese government, it's also against a background where, Kenya's debt is now at high distress in terms of, high possibility of not being able to manage. So you will say Kenya is literally between, two hard rocks because externally, there's a struggle about forex and how to be able to meet the obligations of the different creditors, especially the Eurobond type, which even saw us, have to borrow another Eurobond to pay a previous one. But internally, we are also reaching the limits of domestic borrowing, and you've seen just the subscription. And therefore, the hope was that as we go to China, perhaps the Chinese government will be able to extend more for the kind of projects that Kenya wants to still do. But I think what you see is that China seems to be reducing its risk appetite, and therefore the signing of which we saw on the news, the signing of the smaller than expected version. Of the loans, basically, is to say, one, of course, as you notely appreciating that, yes, China has extended quite a bit, but perhaps it's time to also be a bit more cautious. But perhaps also to say the fact that Kenya is also looking at other, funding from the Asian, from the Asian side. Perhaps China wants to see how much of that can bear fruit, as it were.
All right, Abraham, President Ruto spoke about China supporting a reprofiling of Africa's debt. As things stand, about 25% of how much we pay out to bilateral, it's our biggest bilateral lender, put simply. About 25% of what we are paying in external debt repayments goes to the China Exim Bank. How hopeful should we be as a country? Because in 2020, on account of the COVID pandemic, there was some debt relief. China was reluctant to extend the relief period beyond the first half of 2021.
Thank you very much. I think one is to appreciate that Kenya is still, even with the debt distress situation, Kenya is still considered a lower middle income country, and perhaps that is why the Chinese were willing, to jump straight in. The debt reprofiling, of course, that process is, first of all, a quasi way of declaring a default, basically saying that we are not able to honor the terms under which we took these loans, and therefore we would like to negotiate new terms. We would like, for instance, I'm not too sure China at the moment is keen on providing a relief. Perhaps it might be, as you have seen with quite a number of the other engagements, be it the recent case that was in Zambia and I believe also Sri Lanka. It might be perhaps an arrangement of saying, but perhaps can we manage certain assets that we have helped either to build or assets that are, are strategic to be able to recoup. The SGR is a good example. So here in Kenya, where they are the ones operating it to be able to recoup, but the experience has been that how much they are recouping back. And therefore, I think it's a wait and see situation because they also have their own pressures as a country, and I think they have learned from experiences of other countries, and therefore my suspicion is that this whole engagement is likely going to be an arrangement where it's not necessarily getting a relief, but an arrangement where we find other ways, which including managing of certain assets to be able to recover. So it's really a matter of wait and see. But that is also to be weighed to depending on how also, for instance, the G20 behaves towards it, how the various development banks, including the World Bank and IMF, behave towards that kind of a call. Because really, I think every country is also looking. Most of our lenders are also looking to see how the other one behaves to be able to decide what is the best approach towards this. But while noting that bilateral arrangements are perhaps the ones that give you the best possibility to be able to negotiate, a concession, to be able to negotiate new terms, unlike commercial borrowing like Eurobond that is fairly fixed.
We're also seeking to diversify our financing, and so there was talk of panda bonds. How do those compare to the Eurobonds that we've previously relied on?
Yeah, so the idea around diversification is largely trying to manage risk. So as you see, a lot of the Eurobonds, which are largely from the West, from Europe and then the US, are not a short term. So for instance, the one that we took just recently to be able to offset the 2014 one is for 6 years, of course paid in 3 terms, but the interest rate. So 2 things we are trying to manage here. First of all, we are trying to see the possibility as a country to get lower interest rates in the international market. So first of all, to be able to get higher amounts, because as I've said, we are reaching the limits of domestic borrowing without collapsing the economies, because that crowds out a private sector from the engagement. So you're trying to find huge amounts of funding in better terms. So better terms here meaning that you have longer repayment periods. It doesn't make it cheaper, but makes it more manageable because of the chunks you need to pay per year, and at a lower interest rates, but also with a bit of a free hand to be able to apply, to apply those resources. And the fact that these are, the panda, the samurai bonds, these are largely coming from the Asian side. Some of them backed, by the Japanese and the like. Basically, what they are, those bonds in comparison to in comparison to Eurobond, they basically give you, they are giving you, lower interest rates, longer repayment periods, and also can come, of course, with the usual support and technical support that comes with it. But basically, the main thing of this diversification is to see how basically you can be able then to even use those resources to retire, the pressing and expensive debts that you already have.
All right. Lastly, Abraham, is there any significance to our joining the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank?
Yeah, I think there is, of course, because what happens is that, that, of course, then opens us to a broader Asian market. As you know, a lot of our engagements in the Asian world has largely been bilaterally. So Kenya, Kenya with China, Kenya with Japan, Kenya with Korea, Kenya sometimes even in conversations with countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And therefore, what that does is that when you are a member, of that infrastructure bank, then definitely you have certain benefits that you are getting. You have access to a wider, portfolio that you can be able to negotiate through. And of course, engagements in this, gives you even a leverage in terms of your negotiating power to be able to engage. It does not necessarily make it reduce the kind of challenges you have, because as we know very well, some of the challenges we have with our debt have nothing to do with the source of financing, have largely to do with how we have used that money, how fiducious we have been able to apply it with the projects that we are doing and we are engaging with. The other thing is to also appreciate that the Asian investment bank is largely the World Bank type in the sense that the funding is largely project specific. It's largely with a bit more accountability structure, which then would perhaps help us to start to track even the resources a bit much better. But that's my take. But more importantly is really what we do with the resources once they arrive in the country. Do we actually apply them for those projects? Are we diligent enough to make sure that there is accountability for every dollar, every shilling, every yen that comes here? I think it opens us up, gives us more opportunities, helps us again in this diversification engagement for the kind of financing we need for our development. But then it will only make more sense when it is matched with the internal accountability of how the resources are applied in the country.
All right. Thank you for that insight. Abraham Rugo, Executive Director, Bajeti Hub.